Nomiki Show. We clash momentarily for clash solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is Wednesday, February 2nd, and I am, of course, Nomiki Const, and I had a very rough morning. I had a rough morning because I got my booster shot. I finally got my booster shot, not because I didn't want it. Let me be very clear for those of you out there. It's because it's been very hard to get an appointment here in New York. So I got my booster shot less than 24 hours ago, and in the middle of the night, in the early morning, I started to feel chills and a severe headache and stomach pains, which was surprising to me because on my first two shots, I really didn't feel that down. I got a little sleepy. You know, I think everybody's had different symptoms, but I was a mess. Why do I bring this up right now? Because today, the White House says that it will no longer require hospitals to report deaths to HHS. That's today. Now, as of right now, as of February 1st, yesterday, there were 3,579 deaths, the 7-day average of 2,669, pretty much nearing the peak, almost nearing the peak of where we were in November of last year, November 26th, when Omicron started to spread. There are 890,000 deaths that have occurred in the United States alone and 75.3 million cases in the United States alone. What is the logic here, Biden administration? I mean, really, what is the logic? This is the kind of thing that I don't understand about their public health communication. We have a problem. We have misinformation that's being spread. We have folks who still don't trust the government and they don't think there's the clear message, and they point their fingers at Dr. Fauci and they think he's evil because, oh, we got you in a lie. Well, what lie? No, it's public health. Things change. He's a scientist, essentially. He's a doctor who has been studying, he's been studying viral. He was at the forefront of the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. This is somebody who's been doing this. If he's not the best, he's one of the best in the world, epidemiologists. So obviously this is about a group of people who don't want to be controlled, who don't want to be told what to do, who don't trust the government for many reasons, who don't trust the pharmaceutical industries for many understandable reasons. But at the end of the day, the facts are out. And so this becomes a point where how do you communicate the facts and how do you motivate and really make sure that people are doing what's right? Well, not declaring the deaths in a hospital to Health and Human Services? What is that about? I'm genuinely hoping that is not so Biden doesn't have to deal with negative press. It's that he doesn't have to deal with the Republicans saying, well, gee, it's just as many deaths. No, there's more deaths under Biden than there were under Trump. So gotcha. Look at you, Dr. Fauci. Of course, that's what the Republicans are already doing. They're already doing that. But we, of course, understand, the majority of Americans understand that the more people get vaccinated, the less likely we're going to have to do another booster, the less likely we're going to have new strains of the virus. This is so much worse because it was much more transmutable, especially, and if you caught it and you weren't vaccinated, you're again more likely to go to the hospital. But if you're like me and others, and hopefully everybody watching, and you're vaccinated, yes, you can transmute it, but you're less likely to have, of course, the effects that send you to the hospital and potentially put you on your deathbed. I have a very good friend of mine. She's, of course, vaccinated and believes in the science. Her own brother was on his deathbed, young guy, was on his deathbed up until 2 weeks ago. He was just pulled off an IV a few days ago. He has children. She was shocked to learn that he did not trust the vaccine. She did not blame him. She understood he got pulled into this ecosystem of misinformation and doubt. It wasn't that he thought the vaccine had 5G. It's that, with the way that he looked at it was, well, the people that are going to the hospital, they're immunocompromised, they're older, they're more likely to go to the hospital. He didn't think he could as a healthy young man with kids. And of course, he went down one of these spirals, these misinformation spirals, these echo chambers that amplify the mistakes that Dr. Fauci made or his predictions, because again, this is science. And of course, exposing the unclear message that has come out of both the Trump administration, which was at war with the CDC, let's be very clear, and of course, the Biden administration. The Biden administration and the CDC can only do what they can do if the rest of the community takes part in that. If Ron DeSantis understands that the transmission of this virus goes down if people are wearing masks. The transmission of this virus goes down if it is mandatory that people are vaccinated when they walk into a building in Florida. The transmission of this virus goes down if the Trump administration, I don't know, actually thought it was real for the majority of their administration under this pandemic. We are reaping the effects of those decisions of Republican lawmakers who do not take this virus seriously, who want to prolong it for whatever reason, to be an opposition party, to say that, the government's out to get you, to keep their rabid base alive. We have been at war with Trump's quite literal government war against the CDC. Of course, this is happening all over the world. There are communities all over the world who are anti-vax, but a lot of these communities, the messaging is coming from, shocker, the far right, the fascistic right that wants to divide people, that wants to sow anger and division, wants people protesting around the country. Of course, that's what they're doing. So I look at this and I say, what are you doing, Biden administration? You should be clear with your message. There is no this way or that. You can't meet in between. There's no gray area. Do you take this pandemic seriously? And are you going to differentiate yourself? Are you going to do whatever you can legally do to make sure people are vaccinated in workplaces, or use carrot and stick and urge corporations to enforce these things because they have the right to do so? Because it's good for business. I mean, here's a perfect example. You take a flight internationally, you are forced to show your vaccine card and test. But domestically, you don't have to do that to this day. And these planes are packed. And everyone's taking off their masks to drink their drinks and have a little food if you're so lucky to have food on your airplane. It's ridiculous that on domestic flights. So you want more. You want pilots and you want flight attendants to show up to work? Well, maybe you make it safer for them. More people are going to take flights if they don't feel like they are going to get COVID. More people are going to take flights if there are more flights available because you have workers who are safe and healthy and protected. This is actually the logical capitalism in my mind. The safer everybody is as a whole, as a community, the more likely your business is going to do better in this pandemic. And we're seeing that in New York because we have, even though rates did go up very quickly, partly because we did not have a mask mandate when the Omicron surged because it came back, of course. But we have mandates in this state. And of course, the people who are making it to the hospital are those who are not taking those mandates seriously, who are not vaccinated, who don't wear masks, who have gone down this misinformation spiral. Biden administration, you can do better. Okay, we're going to talk about some of this because, of course, there are political implications. We all know what's going on in the world right now. David Doel is going to join us right after this quick break. He is, of course, our favorite Canadian expert on Canada from the Rational National. Oh my God, I don't know if you guys saw what's been going on in Canada, but mind blown. We're going to talk about the protests from the far right in Canada and what kind of implications that has on our favorite, thoughtful lefties to the north. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I'm so excited. One of our favorite people, probably because he's Canadian, he's so nice, is joining us today. David Doel is, of course, the host of The Rational National. And you've got the green screen in the background. You're looking, your studio is so nice. I'm so jealous.
I'm so glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you for having me.
So like the political situation, I woke up like 2 days ago and was like, wait, Canada's now blowing up? What is happening?
Yeah.
All right, let's just start off with some like COVID stuff, because we start off the show talking about stupidity of the Biden administration. It's like when, the Bush administration said like, oh, we're just going to stop reporting on all things involving the environment and like clean air. It's like, if we don't mention it, it's not there.
Yeah.
So what is the COVID policy in Canada? Like, how are you guys handling it?
So it really depends on provinces. Provinces tend to dictate their healthcare situation. Like we have an overall, Canada Health Act, but it depends on the provinces how they want to implement their COVID policy. So, a lot of what I understand is from Ontario, where I live, but there have been, it's varied, of course, depending on the situation. So there are vaccine mandates, for instance, to get into a restaurant, to eat at a restaurant, you have to be vaccinated. Workplaces are not told that they have to mandate vaccines, but it is recommended, and a lot of places do because, if you're going to work somewhere, the vast majority of people in Canada are vaccinated. They have at least 2 doses. 85 to 90% have 2 doses. Wow. The booster has been a little slower, though, so I think we're still around maybe 60% with the booster shot. But it's been, it's been increasing. So, a lot of the pushback, and we'll get to it, a lot of the pushback that we've seen to these health measures, the vaccine mandate, has really just been from a tiny fraction of people. And again, it isn't even there is no vaccine mandate. Like you can still operate in society. You don't need to get vaccinated if you don't want to. But it's, I don't know why you wouldn't at this point. We're having a lot of the same discussions in Canada as Americans are having, I think just on a smaller level and not to as great of a degree as Americans are having. So, our politicians here, for the most part, even conservatives, are pro-vaccine, and they're not, trying to speak out against it. But there are those that try to play to the base, and at least, that small, tiny part of the base, and try to play up, our rights and freedoms and all this bullshit, when in reality, basic public health measures that we've done during any other, pandemic, masking, vaccines, physically distancing. So a lot of our policy, a lot of our approach has really been individualistic. And that's, I think, been a major issue, worldwide in how we've handled this pandemic. But when it comes to, specific policies, as I said, mandates for getting into restaurants and that kind of thing. But generally, and, masking indoors, but generally it's been, I don't know. I think because most Canadians are vaccinated and understand the threat of the pandemic, we are taking it seriously. There hasn't really, I guess, been the need to maybe be more forceful in sorts of policies like mandating workplaces to vaccinate the way that you may have seen, I guess the U.S. has that with certain employers. But we haven't really seen the push for that, though. It may sound like we have because of some of the reaction coming out of it. But, when it comes to our deaths, we have about 34,000 deaths total during this pandemic. About
total.
100. Yeah, total.
Wait, what is the size of Canada? Can we just
So we're 1/10 the size of the U.S. So if you just multiply it by 10, so I'm not sure. I guess so. U.S. have a lot more deaths than we do.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's the point we're trying to make people, okay? In case you don't want to do the math, it's that we have a lot more deaths than Canada does.
Yeah. 340,000. So basically, there's clearly a lot more deaths in the U.S., doing the math there. But 3.7 million cases total, 10,000 new cases over the last day or so. So, there's still, of course, has been an increase with Omicron, but it has gone down since we've taken it a little more seriously. In Ontario, at least, the first 2 weeks of the year, we were going to have schools reopen, but then because of Omicron and that increase, there was actually a pause on that. So schools were closed for the first 2 weeks of the year. They are now open back up, but there is still strict policy around masking. And when it comes to certain workplaces, so hospitals, schools, the staff there have to be vaccinated. So there is, when it comes to certain workplaces, there is a vaccine mandate when you are dealing with, the public on a consistent basis, like at a hospital or in a school. But And yeah, so generally it's kind of just a small example of what's been happening in the U.S. Just I guess it hasn't been as bad as Americans have seen, and I think a large part of that is, of course, the culture. We don't really have a Fox News here, even though we do have conservative media, but it's not as easily accessible, I guess, as maybe just switching on the television and seeing Fox News. So there isn't that impact to the same degree, though. Of course, social media is kind of what's behind this latest craze that's been going on in Ottawa here. So that, of course, has had a massive impact. But generally, all things considered, of course, we could be doing a lot better for sure. We should be doing, contact tracing. Right. There's been a lack of that, I think, generally in the West. Not enough at-home tests has been another major issue. So I've been holding on, for dear life to these 4 at-home tests I've had for the past month, just because, we can't. It's hard to find them. It's still hard to find them. So that's been a major issue. There should be a way. Our government should be sending us these at-home tests. Americans have it now because of the way that healthcare is distributed in Canada on a a provincial basis. We have to. So there is no overall way. Grand strategy in terms of sending people masks, sending people or masks as well, but sending people tests. Mm-hmm. So they've been, basically you have to go to your local, drugstore and pick them up. But that's been the biggest issue, I think, is lack of contact tracing and a lack of at-home tests.
So it's interesting because, all right, we're looking at the United States, and I'm glad we're looking at this map to see where kind of the hotspots are. But in Ottawa, why Ottawa? And I kind of want to loop back. It's like a 2-part question here. So what parts of Canada are ripe for this kind of right-wing organizing, anti-vax organizing, I should say. And simultaneously, it's interesting you say social media is driving this, because I would think from a public health perspective in Canada that there would be pushback against even reporting such a small group of individuals who are protesting it, because it could, of course, spread misinformation and inspire others to do the same thing. I'm again, not one for censorship, but this is if the press treated every protest equally, this might be a fair conversation, but they don't. And the press definitely amplified what's happening on social media. The international press did. I, woke up to it a couple of days ago. So why Ottawa? Are there other regions that are very conservative? And the truckers, of course. And then how the press is responding. Are people criticizing that?
So it's happening in Ottawa simply because that's the capital. So that's where all the laws are made. So that's why they've all kind of converged in Ottawa. Alberta, I would say, is the largest hotbed for this sort of right wing thinking. Though these pockets exist everywhere. It's largely a rural Canadian thing. That isn't to paint just generally all rural areas like this, but that's where you find a lot of this this sort of far right sentiment. But it is largely Alberta, definitely a major piece of it, and that's where one of the main organizers of this so-called freedom convoy is a white nationalist. There's videos of him discussing his thoughts about this. Other organizers have tried, at least rhetorically or publicly, to try to separate themselves from him, but he's still a part of it. He's still on social media discussing, what they're doing with the $7 million plus they've raised on GoFundMe.
What?
Yeah, they've raised over $7 million. Is
there a sense of where it's coming from? Is there international money coming in?
Yeah, definitely. There isn't. Yeah.
Oh, shocker.
Yeah. So it's not clear where all of it's coming from, but definitely, I know GoFundMe had initially put a pause on their fundraising because they weren't sure where this money was going to, and they're still not really sure. No one really knows. When this convoy first came into Ottawa, restaurants were turning them away because they were trying to go in unmasked, trying to get food, and they were being pushed out. So what some of them ended up doing is going to a homeless soup kitchen, barging into there, pressuring the staff. Yeah, they took money took food from the homeless because they couldn't.
Are you kidding?
No, you can look this up. It's now, to be fair, not all of them did this, but yes, a number of them did this. They went into a homeless shelter, bullied the staff there and got food from the homeless. So it gives you an idea of the kinds of people that are part of this movement. You see Nazi flags flying. You see a
Wow.
lot of that far right sentiment throughout this thing. And what parts or what certain people will say that are part of this, they'll be like, oh, that's, a few bad individuals, a few bad apples. But if you saw that in any other rally, if that was like, I don't know, at a Bernie Sanders rally, at an environmentalist rally, at any other rally, we would push those people out. We wouldn't allow them to be with us. But they're still there. They're doing their bullshit. And when you accept them into the group, then I'm sorry, but you're all that way now.
That's right.
Unless you push them out, then that is how you are being identified as. And you have to, and now, to be fair, like, the numbers now apparently are down to like 50 people. There's like 50 people at the Capitol. This
is ridiculous. It's getting as much attention with 50 people. Are you kidding me? I mean, look, you're empowering them, but what it's doing is it's not just empowering maybe some people, maybe not in Canada, but it's like empowering people globally to be like, oh, if Canada's like this, then we can too. It's like you said, there's $7 million. Who knows where that's coming from? Sorry,
the issue though is like, this is always the delicate balance is we should still, it still needs to be covered to call out what is going on, to expose these people for who they are. Because if you don't cover it, then you're sort of giving into their idea that, oh, look, they're ignoring us,
right,
which they still claim that the media is ignoring this. Like, no, there's a lot of media worldwide about what's going on here. But you have to, like, it's a delicate balance between how much should we cover this because it isn't that many people really, but at the same time, they are essentially shutting down downtown Ottawa. People can't leave their homes. They can't go out. The mall's been closed for a week. So there's still enough people where there's, they've had.
The mall's been closed. Can you even
they marched, that? A bunch of them marched through the big mall in Ottawa without masks on. And after that, they had to close down the mall. So the mall's been closed for the past few days. It's apparently not closed for the entire week. So they've shut down, even though it's not that many trucks, there is still enough trucks there to shut down these streets. People can't move around. The cops don't seem all that concerned at the moment. I imagine if it was Black Lives Matter or Indigenous protesters or environmentalists, it would be a much different story. But so this has all been essentially enabling them to continue what is going on. Now, it is incredibly cold right now, so I'm sure that has helped to whittle down the numbers to where they currently are at around 50 people, and then there apparently like 200 or so outside of the movement, whatever that means. So there's like 50 downtown, then 200 or so still kind of lounging around. So, 250 at most apparently right now in downtown Ottawa, but it's still enough with their trucks to shut down the city. And it is becoming a major issue. And again, if it was any other group fighting actual capital, this is also why they're allowed to get away with this.
That's right.
They aren't fighting capitalism. They're fighting to open up capital. So if it's, a movement in a different direction, there's going to be a much different response. But because they are pro-capitalism, then, what's going on for the people in power is perfectly fine.
So, two questions here. Why truckers? Obviously supply chain is a big conversation right now. So, there are plenty of different industries in which people are a little bit more conservative. I'm not saying that this is even representative of all truckers, but why truckers? And then tell us about how Trudeau is kind of relating to everything right now.
So there is a vaccine mandate on truckers to cross the border, and the vast majority of them are vaccinated. The actual organization that represents truckers in Canada is against the convoy. Wow. So this has largely been co-opted by a small group of people to make it sound like, oh, you got to be with the truckers, which I am with the truckers. 90% of them are vaccinated. Yeah. They are on the roads doing their job. They don't support this convoy. You are the ones against the truckers, but they have made it out to try and make it out to be this like working class issue when that's not at all what is going on here. It has been co-opted by a far right movement and about, freedoms, general freedoms. And then when you ask them what freedoms are being restricted, oh, I can't go and eat without a mask in McDonald's without a vaccine. Oh, okay, that's your freedom that's being restricted. Like, talk to the Indigenous protesters who had their land stolen. Like, it's completely ridiculous. And in terms of Trudeau, he has spoken out against it, and he has, tried to label this as on the Conservative Party, which is fine. But as the Prime Minister, don't you have a little more power to, I don't know, do something else? Now, to be fair, others will say, well, if you advocate for, police action in this case, then you're essentially greenlighting police action when it comes to a Black Lives Matter protest or something else. And my response to that is that it depends on the situation. Like, what are you fighting for? Are you being disruptive in the sense where you are actually hurting the very people that you're pretending to fight for? Like, all of it for me is in context. And even apart from that, just simply, we should acknowledge the hypocrisy here of how different groups are treated depending on what they're actually fighting for and who are the ones that are doing the protesting.
So David, our producer, just updated us that Quebec recently implemented a vaccine mandate to enter cannabis and liquor stores. Vaccine appointments skyrocketed. And this is that carrot and stick. It's like, if you have to actually be part of society, whether it's getting on a plane. My frustration in the US right now is I actually think more people are going to fly on the plane, and the industry, everybody will be more protected as a whole. But simultaneously, there are a lot of industries that can make these decisions. There are companies that can make these decisions if it brushes up against, whatever the law is in Canada. What is the percentage of like far right in Canada? Like, can you help us kind of understand the map? Like,
I just want to mention first, Quebec was also going to implement a tax on the unvaccinated. There was so much pushback to that they didn't end up doing it. I actually don't think that's a great idea. I think mandates make a lot more sense in encouraging people to get the vaccine, and
it empowers them too, because they're like, they don't want to be controlled by the government. And it's just like, oh, here's another thing, and their little movement gets louder.
And also, I imagine the tax would fall mostly on those who are lower income, and it just that kind of thing would make sense. But when it comes to the mandate to enter cannabis and liquor stores, these mandates, they work. Now, again, it's a mandate depending on where you're going. So it's not really like you're not being held down and given the vaccine. But if you want to participate in society and you care about society, then we should be vaccinated to protect others. Now, when it comes to the percentage of the far right here, I don't know. It's really hard. This is a number that's it's. I feel like Canadian media, this is where we fail. Quite honestly, there is not a lot of really detailed information on how common this sort of thinking is. Now, there has been measures put in place in terms of labeling certain groups as terrorist organizations, like the Proud Boys are now labeled a terrorist organization, so which has made it harder for them to in Canada, which has made it harder for them to fundraise and to recruit people. But in terms of a percentage here, it's I can't even really wager a guess, to be honest with you. It's tough to really know, but it's enough to have an impact when they all band together and shut down a city. So, there's at least that voice there. And now, actually, as of recording, just before recording this, the leader of the Conservative Party was voted out as leader, and they're going to pick somebody else. So the current leader is a little more rhetorically, socially progressive, at least has tried to be a little more welcoming in that sense. And part of the party, at least a third of the party, was not happy with that. They're the ones that initiated the vote to oust him. They have been successful in getting others on board, so he may possibly be replaced by somebody who's even more conservative than he is, which is scary to me, but we're going to find out where that goes. But it gives you an idea of where the pressure points here are for the right. I mean, when they... Even though they may be a small percentage of Canada, they are still a large percentage of the Conservative Party.
Of the Conservative Party. Got it. Okay, that was my next question.
Yeah, and I think a recent poll showed that 50% of them, of Canadian Conservative voters, think that Trump won the election or doubt that Biden won the election. So, about half of the Conservative Party thinks this insanity. So now when it comes to numbers, it's hard to gauge because not everybody votes, and, that kind of, it's hard to put an actual figure on that. But it's still, when it's half of your base thinks complete lunacy, then that's going to have a real impact on public policy as a whole, because then you're going to have MPs that want to speak to that, and they're going to be representatives of that in Parliament, and that's going to have an impact on society as a whole. So, this next year, with a new leader in the Conservative Party, I think will really dictate how serious it's going to get here if we are going to follow in the footsteps of the U.S. when it comes to, Trumpism, as that's already been brewing here for a while, but will it have a public face, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
Do What percentage is the Conservative Party? Can we just brief analysis of like the political parties in Canada? Who
Yeah,
makes
I
up
almost have
the
to look at like
largest-
the recent election. So because elections here are so weird, like our parties form majority governments with a
Right.
minority of the vote. So, Trudeau, I think all of his majorities have been under 50% of the vote. But in terms of the actual, so they've always come in second place. Generally, it's usually the Liberals up
Oh,
top,
interesting.
and then it's the Conservatives, and then the NDP are way below. So the battles each election is usually between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And what ends up happening often is that the so-called left vote gets split between the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens. But there is also a swing vote between the Conservatives and the Liberals. So, there's a lot at play there. But in terms of a percentage, again, because like 60% of us vote, it's hard to understand or hard to know what percentage of that really is actually conservative, or they just vote, based on one thing they heard. Like I've discussed this before in the past. The first time I voted conservative. And this is before I knew anything about politics. It was simply because we had a Liberal for a long time. I'm like, oh, change would be good. Let's vote for this guy. So
Right.
like, that's a lot of people, right? A lot of people don't really follow what's going on. They're just like, oh, I want a new face. And they vote. So even if you vote conservative or you vote Liberal, it doesn't mean you really support what that platform or what that party represents, because it may just be, oh, I want a new face. So it's, yeah. And
Do you
when it
think
comes
that the
to,
Conservatives will overplay their hand if they pick a more radical right leader? Like there might be an opening to challenge the establishment, challenge Trudeau, but if they go with somebody, if they go in a more extreme direction, do you think that'll empower or weaken Trudeau?
I think it'll empower him. I think
Yeah.
it will. I think it could have a negative impact on our political discourse generally, just the day to day and what is discussed. But when it comes to an actual election, I find it very hard to believe that a social conservative can win, because that's ultimately what has hurt previous conservative leaders. It hurt Harper, it hurt Andrew Scheer. That's why the recent leader tried to speak a little more to that more socially progressive, I guess. Again, rhetorically, who knows, in terms of his actual votes and everything, that's separate. But in terms of the rhetoric and pushing a different message, he did try to speak more to that, because he understood it wasn't a good look.
Right.
So they tried to move away from that. But now, if they go in a more conservative direction, I do think ultimately it will hurt them as a party, but it will, I think, have a negative impact on our discourse and what we discuss in the day-to-day.
David, I love talking Canada with you. We have to do this more often. I love
Yes.
talking international politics in general, because it's just sometimes it can be refreshing, and also knowing that there's something much bigger at play here. Really fascinating to see that like they're raising that much money, and I'm really curious where. So if you hear anything, let us know. I'd love to pick up this conversation. David Doel. David. Oh, whoa, that was a big zoom in. After not feeling well all day from my booster, I'm like, I can now see all of my words.
Oh my
David,
God,
thank you so
I've
much
barely
for-
been sleeping.
Oh, well, you have a child. You have
I'm
a
amazed I
baby.
even got out words today. Yeah, that's the reason, actually.
How old is he now?
Just turned a year. He's a year and a month.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
He's
How
wonderful,
fun.
but my God, is he crazy?
It's a lot of work. Oh wait, I hear it gets worse.
Oh, I know.
All right, David, thanks for joining us. Hope to talk to you very soon again.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. We'll be right back real quick with it's Solidarity Wednesdays. I dropped the ball here. Oh my gosh, I buried the lead. It's Solidarity Wednesday, and we have a special Solidarity Wednesday today with, of course, the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, Ben Dixon, and our good friend Rep Rabb, who's going to be joining us in this part of the hour, and of course for the panel. But I thought it would be really fun to have him on for Solidarity Wednesday as well. We'll be right back after this quick little break. Hey guys, we are independent media. I don't know if you know that. We're independent media and we are only able to function and survive with your help as patrons. You never know what the algorithm is going to do. One day you're making a little money on the algorithm, the next day they've completely cut you dry. We are not Joe Rogan. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to be peddling any vaccine conspiracy theories anytime soon. So as a result, we really rely on Patreon. So if you are not already and you love this show and you have a little bit of extra money and you're willing to be part of our Patreon community, we can do more. We can have a lot more fun. In fact, in the next month or so, we're going to be announcing some new things that patrons will exclusively get. And trust me, they are fun. Go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. If you're already a patron, thank you so much. You make this show run. If you are already a patron and want to up it, we're always grateful. And sometimes if you're able to do so, that's able to cover folks who can no longer afford to be patrons or having a tough time right now. And if you are, please email us at thenomikishow@gmail.com. We're always working things out. Got lots of different options here. You get mugs, you get bags, you get stickers, all sorts of swag, and of course, special events and conversations, exclusive conversations. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. It is Solidarity Wednesday. This is the day where we have conversations about how we can make sure our movement is not divided, but united, that we have different allies come on. We have conversations about movement building, what stands in the way of our movement, what kind of red flags we should be looking out for, what we can learn from our allies, what we can learn from each other, and how we can all amplify each other towards a common goal, which is, of course, to make sure that we have a more just, equal society that is not, completely dictated by capital. We have the one and only Benjamin Dixon, who's the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show here. And of course, this is a fun one, Rep Rabb, who is a representative in Pennsylvania. Look at him. He's got his little his little pin on right now. Of course, Rep Rabb represents the 200th district. You're very official. All right. Are you official? Because we have rules where I can't talk about certain things with you. Can we talk politics?
Yes, we can talk politics today.
There we go.
I'm not on my government laptop. Yes,
it is.
It's a very serious firewall. Hey,
how are you?
Good to see you. Hey, good to see you. All is well.
So I want to start off with something. I think that folks are starting to understand what the serious and the importance of local organizing means. They're starting to pay more attention to these state races. Of course, we're in a redistricting year. We just got our lines in New York. They're not completely confirmed yet, but it looks like that's where we're going. Pennsylvania is like one of those states that's a conundrum. I think folks think, oh, it's totally Democratic. And then you listen to Rep Rabb and you're like, what is going on there? But let's start off with this race that's heating up and like how it, I think a lot of folks know who John Fetterman is and Connor Lamb. There is this race right now in Pennsylvania for the Senate, and I did not understand this is how the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania works, which I'm sure Rep Rabb will explain to us. But it's all about who's going to be nominated. There are a few people who are running, so let's play this clip and then dive in.
A closer look at Pennsylvania this afternoon, where Democrats have declined to rally behind one candidate in a key Senate race. It's a lack of endorsement. for Democratic Congressman Conor Lamb. He's been working to try and get support from party insiders, and the stakes are really high for Democrats in this race. The Philadelphia Inquirer points out, quote, national Democrats are watching Pennsylvania's Senate race closely. It is one of the most competitive in the country, likely their best chance to flip a seat in the chamber, and it could help determine which party has the majority after this year. I want to bring in now Julia Taruso, a staff writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer, my hometown paper, who's been following the story very closely. We're so glad to have you on, Julia. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much.
So talk about what went down for Congressman Lamb, because he still got a lot of votes, right, from state Democrats, but he didn't hit that 2/3 threshold that would have triggered a formal endorsement, right?
Right. So Congressman Lamb went in needing 2/3 of a room of about 300 party insiders. You know, these are really active, hyper-engaged Democrats who are paying attention to the primary 3.5 months out. And he worked hard to kind of try to call these members up, send mailers to their places, their houses. And he came close. He got about 60% or so, but fell short of that 2/3.
Okay, so that's a basic overview of how this works, but there are other people in this race. I'm gonna go to
never know it.
Yeah. So
You'd never
based
know
on the
it.
media.
I mean, surprise, surprise, but corporate media is like, why didn't Conor Lamb secure it? Which is a leading question. You would think that he is the only viable candidate in the race. There are others. I actually just endorsed Malcolm Kenyatta. Malcolm Kenyatta is a second-term state representative from Philadelphia, represents one of the poorest districts in the entire state. He's been an advocate for social justice issues since day one, and he's getting short shrift. He is both Black and queer. He's the first out rep of color in state history, and is a very compelling candidate. But here's the thing: the way they said it was presumed that Conor Lamb should have locked this in because of his national exposure as a conservative Democrat from Western PA. But here's the thing: his whole premise is that he's won before. He's won over Republicans in pink districts, right? In pink areas. But if Black people don't come out in Philly, it doesn't matter how good he is out west. It's not going to be enough.
Learn that with Hillary.
Exactly. Well, we've
was
learned
the
it
playbook,
with,
right?
but we've learned it with everybody. We learned it with Katie McGinty, who ran for Senate before, is the most expensive at the time, the most expensive senatorial campaign in U.S. history. She lost by, I think, less than half of 1%. But if you don't activate the base, and you are a Democratic candidate statewide, you will lose. You will lose. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how good he is in Central PA. It doesn't matter how good he is talking to Republicans if you sacrifice the base. And we just saw it in this last election cycle. We have in Pennsylvania, we have all elected judges from local all the way to state Supreme Court. And we lost 3 of the 4 of those races initially to Republicans because Democrats in Philly didn't come out. And let's put a point on it. If just Black folk who are already registered just in one county of all 67 came out, all Democrats would be in those positions, right? Would be in those positions. And some of those candidates were pretty compelling and would have diversified very bench. Now, when we talk about the senatorial race, we talk about it's Conor's to lose. But John Fetterman, who's our current lieutenant governor,
let's hold on that because I want to break it up, and we'll get to Fetterman in a second. Okay. Ben, I think you had a question. I saw you.
No, not really a question so much, but just an observation that it sounds like the race there is the same as in every other state. If the Democratic Party actually, ran someone who could activate the community, to activate the base, like you said, Rabb, actually deliver tangibles for the Black community, winning is not even a difficult thing. It's that they literally are trying to win without giving Black people a reason to get up and come vote for them. And I'm just seeing that. I saw that in Georgia, right? We just see this all the way around the country. Every state we look at, it seems to be the same strategy.
Absolutely.
So Fetterman, I'm glad that you mentioned Fetterman because then you've got the lieutenant governor who is sort of, he's endorsed by Bernie Sanders. He did endorse Bernie Sanders. In the past, he was endorsed by Bernie Sanders. I don't know about this race. He has, kind of leans to the left and populist, but he's portraying himself as like the alternative to Conor Lamb. But he's got some issues. Rabb, what happened?
All right. So Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman is from York County, which is in south central PA, but moved years ago to Braddock, which is a Rust Belt town, majority Black, just outside of Pittsburgh. And he was the mayor there for a number of years. And it had a lot of gun violence, and he was doing a lot of kind of community outreach and talking about issues that a lot of white mayors don't talk about, frankly. So that kind of his claim to fame was that he was kind of like an innovative small town mayor of a majority Black town. But the things that have kind of put him on the map that may be impressive in Western PA, west of the Susquehanna River, are he's pro-LGBTQ rights, he's pro-weed, legalizing weed, and he supports essentially criminal justice reform, particularly as it relates to pardons. As lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania, you oversee the pardon process. So that's your new unique substantive power as a lieutenant governor. And so those are all great issues, but they're not particularly impressive to folks who live in the greater Philadelphia area, because we've been on those issues for a long time. So while that may seem odd coming from a white politico in Western PA, which is more socially conservative, that's just like everyday news for those of us who've been, on the enlightened side of things for some time. So he doesn't distinguish himself from a Malcolm Kenyatta in that regard. What makes him viable is that he's white, and he's also been able to reach, I believe, white millennials who like that he's different. He's 6'8", he's tatted up, he wears cargo shorts, and like Tony Soprano shirts. Like, I mean, he's like, he just does his own thing, and I think that has appeal. And we've seen how candidates, irrespective of their political ideology, get kind of support because they don't fit, the mold. And I'm not saying he's like Donald Trump in terms of his politics. He despises Donald Trump, but he has that kind of like, let's try something different here. Let's go with the guy who's, a walking mountain full of tats and says stuff that most politicians don't say. And, that may appeal to a certain subset of voters, but it is not substantive enough. And also he's had issues as it relates to his race politics.
Right. So
yes.
I'm going to set that up real quick. So there's this this situation that I think, Ben, you're familiar with it. The New York Times has even touched on it, that in 2013, when Fetterman was mayor, he used a gun to stop a man named Christopher Mayaris, a Black man jogging nearby, after saying he heard gunshots. And of course, the police, which is very unusual for the police, right, found no arm. The man was not armed at all as he was jogging. I mean, Ben, I want to go to you first on this, just because I think it's mind-boggling to me that that he's basically second right now, and after all of these conversations about how important the Black base is in Pennsylvania, in turning out Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, the two front runners in this race, at least in the Democratic right, and obviously it's not chosen, are two white men. One who's a corporate white congressman, and the other who is got real issues, and he's won statewide. What does this say about the party in this moment? Like, the curtains, been pulled back. Yeah. No, I feel like brother Rabb, it's been pulled back for some time, and I think it is. I'm thinking back of I can't think of the actor's name who was on stage with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, Harry Belafonte, when he said he's here to see if there's anything worth salvaging from the embers that is the Democratic Party. Because, let's just be real about it. In terms of
strategic advantage in terms of legislative control of houses across the country, in terms of different pieces of legislation that's being organized by ALEC and sent around the country. The Democratic Party is getting their ass whipped. And Black folks who have the solution for them are oftentimes overlooked, not only overlooked, but actively worked against in favor of some of these milquetoast moderates.
It's milquetoast is right. Oh my God.
Well
Connor
said.
Lamb, I don't know. Is he going to inspire folks? Rabb,
No, well, he's not going to. I don't think he will. And his argument, because I'm a member of State Committee. State Committee is the apparatus that runs the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. And so the people who vote for endorsements for the party showed up last weekend, largely virtually. And there were only about 300 odd voters out of 13 million Pennsylvanians. So it's not really a great subset. And these folks who are party loyalists and party who are on the ground are not necessarily highly influential. The higher up the office, the less influential folks are. My neighbors, I'm a Democratic committee person in my neighborhood for 16 years. I represent 500 fellow registered Democrats, and they want to know, well, I don't know anything about Judge. Who should I vote for? Yeah. And I let them know that sort of thing. But they're not asking me who I'm voting for president. I'm not influencing them on a high level. And I may not influence. And so the higher up you get, the stronger the opinion. So these 300 odd folks in the state committee aren't necessarily going to have an outsized influence on their neighbors when it comes to things like governor, because that's also on the ballot coming up, and senator. And so what that means is Connor Lamb was making a point to party insiders that I'm someone who's proven in Trump country, right? Fetterman saying I'm proven statewide, but here's the thing: he won against an embattled incumbent Democratic lieutenant governor who was caught up in a real big mess.
Right.
So it kind of made it easier for him to get in there. It wasn't like there was a wide array of folks to choose from. He was the only viable challenger to an incumbent lieutenant governor who had really bad press and made it easy for almost anybody to beat him. So it's not a good litmus test for how strong he is statewide. And it's certainly not a litmus test for the base in our party, which are Black folk and are disproportionately represented in the city of Philadelphia. For your viewers who don't know, Philly is a city of 1.6 million people. The next largest city in the state only has roughly 300,000, and that's Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Yeah.
And a lot of bridges, by the way, in Pittsburgh. A lot of bridges. So I'm glad that Ben brought up ALEC, because this is obviously the right-wing Koch brothers agenda to weaken Democrats and specifically people of color and marginalized communities has been by design, and it has coincided with Democrats just kind of thinking, well, Connor Lamb's the solution. I mean, one after another after another. But it's gotten so bad because when you look at the worst states in the country in terms of right-wing agenda, I think, we might all agree Florida might be one of the worst. Even though there's a lot of diversity in Florida. No one's going to sit there and say it's not. The South is diverse, folks. Oh my God, there is a bill right now. I don't even know what to say about this. Let's just roll this clip of the anti-woke bill coming out of the genius mindset of the Florida leadership.
Just moments ago, the Florida State Legislature finished up a hearing on what is being called the Stop Woke Act. Supporters of the bill say it's going to keep students from being made to, quote, feel discomfort, guilt, and anguish based on one's race, color, sex, or national origin. So this is just one of the latest proposals up for debate that focus on what kids are allowed to be taught in public schools. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard is outside that hearing in Tallahassee, Florida. Vaughn, you got to tell me what's going on there, right? Because I don't understand what that even means to keep students from being made to feel discomfort, guilt, and anguish based on one's race, color, and sex. Who's the judge of that? And what about how this is going to affect, for instance, those LGBTQ students?
Right. Yasmin, what I can tell you what is happening here is that there is a direct effort by GOP legislatures here in Florida, but also around the country, to limit the speech that is allowed inside of classrooms, particularly around the conversations of race, of sexuality, and of history. The so-called Stop Woke Act that is being backed by the governor here, Ron DeSantis, part of it says that educators, they cannot lead students to feel that they, quote, bear responsibility for actions committed in the past. We'd be remiss not to note that about 200 years ago, that U.S. troops led by Andrew Jackson pushed out multiple Native American tribes from the very land here where this piece of legislation is now being debated today. But there's also another piece of legislation, HB 1557. Opponents have called this the Don't Say Gay Act here. I want to read you part of it because it's already been passed by the House Education Committee here and is waiting to go to the full House for a vote. It says in part, quote, a school district may not encourage classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity. It gives the parents the right to sue educators in school districts here. I want everybody to meet Kaylee Sandell.
Wow.
All right. Ben,
that's Pennsylvania.
This is insane. This is okay. First off, unconstitutional. Let's just be very clear that they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think what they're doing is they know it's unconstitutional, but it is a way to organize and keep their every single aspect engaged. Ben, I know you've covered this on your show. What have you learned about this?
You know, I've learned honestly that people have a tendency to allow it's almost like the Trojan horse. Anybody who is foolish enough to allow the don't say gay portion of the bill to sneak in, they're letting in the entirety of it, which is don't let people feel guilty about racism. And one thing I give the Republican Party is they're masters of wedge issues. They're always going to pair issues that's going to inflame people racially, but also along the LGBTQIA lines. So they're masters at this. What you said is very true. Of course, it's not constitutional, but I do have a fear of exactly how, what's the process. They don't mind going through the courts, because they figure they're going to at least find one court that's going to side with them and at least give them another point of that rallying, organizing principle that they're using this for. So it's magnificent in terms of being a Machiavellian politician. It's insidious because of who it's willing to hurt just to get some cheap points.
And you know, Rabb, I mean, you're dealing with these folks in the legislature every single day, and I applaud you for being able to do that without losing your mind. You must have a really great meditation practice. Good thing you guys look good without it. But it's this. Okay, I don't want to lean into the Whoopi Goldberg thing because she made comments about the Holocaust, which were horrifying. But I was thinking, as this guy was talking about anti-gay, you know, I know we're not supposed to use these comparisons, but the far right is mimicking a lot of the strategies that they can get away with legally by silencing voices that they don't want to speak up, whether it's because they think they're a supreme race, which, let's just be real, that is what they think they are, many of these people, or, you know, being anti-gay. I mean, the fact that these two things can go together, and of course the anti-women component, Rabb, like when you're in the legislature talking about Alec and the folks pushing this, do you get a sense that they're just like, how does it work? Are they handed talking points? Do they have committee meetings? Who's coming up with these ideas? Uh-oh, did he freeze? I think we lost him. Whoop. I think you're frozen. You back?
Yeah. All right. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. So yes, Alec. That is the business model of ALEC. ALEC provides model legislation to promote xenophobia, homophobia, patriarchy and white supremacy for corporate benefit, right? That's what they do. And so they all get these. So if you see something in Florida and they're the first, it's just a matter of days or weeks before it comes to Pennsylvania. So we have the anti-CRT bill. We have that. It hasn't come to the floor yet, and I can't wait till it does because I got some doozies just waiting for them. But they don't. So in Pennsylvania, we have Democratic governor who will veto that, and we can sustain that veto. But they do it to exactly do what you say, which is to whip up the base, to raise money, to organize, right, to strengthen. But they go too far, which is a strategic opportunity for the rest of us. That's because right. I don't think the suburbs, particularly not the exurbs, but the suburbs, they may not have the same politics. But when it comes to stuff like they're talking about their queer daughter or son, that's getting a little too close, right?
Of course.
Right. So, and the swing voters in the most important elections are in the suburbs. And this is not something that they're interested in. They're interested in tax breaks.
Right, of course.
They're not interested in this kind of stuff. And so they are solidifying their base, but I don't think they're expanding that much to expand, frankly. But the reason this is good for us is it'll piss us off and say, oh, I probably need to get out to vote because we can't let this happen. I can't believe this is happening. And so it requires something this awful for folks who are already registered to vote to say, oh, yeah, I guess this election does matter. But it's up to those people who are part of these campaigns and elections to say, this is what's at stake. You literally will not be able to say X in the classroom. You will not be able to read these books. You will not be able to express your full selves if this bill is enacted into law. And that's a communication thing that we're not so good at in the Democratic Party, to say the least.
We got to say goodbye to Ben really quick. I hate to cut you off, but we're going to continue with Rep. Don't worry, Rep. Rabb, you're sticking around. but we're going to
have at least one bald man on the show at all times. So Rep. Rabb, I need you to hold it down while I get to this next.
I will, brother. I will.
Solidarity for bald men.
There it is. There it is. Nomiki, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Go check out Ben. I show up on Ben's show every Wednesday. We do in the morning on his show, the Benjamin Dixon Show, and all the places. We do Solidarity Wednesday, and then back here. I missed it this morning because I had my booster and I felt like crap. But thank you so much.
Pleasure's mine. Take care, Rep. Rabb.
All right.
We're gonna bring in right now. We're gonna bring in Arun Chaudhary, who's in Italy. I hear. What?
Every week, every time it's a new country with this guy.
But Italy.
In Padua, Italy. Yeah, gorgeous spot here in Veneto.
Oh, okay. It's snow. It's wet snow outside my door. So
same here in Philly.
And let me also say what only people with hair are allowed to say. Rep. Rabb, I'll say this to Ben Dixon next time I see him. It doesn't matter. It's okay. You know, being bald is totally great. It's totally fine.
It looks great. Not everybody can pull it off.
Absolutely.
Well.
Absolutely.
Hey, look, it was a choice. I just decided to go for it, so I'm keeping it.
I'm loving it.
Thank you.
I want to quickly set up for Arun Chaudhary, for those of you who don't know, is a political filmmaker. He's the host of a committee. He was the first official White House videographer and was the creative director for Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, which I had a lot of fun running around the country, running into him as he had cameras all over him, and really good stuff. We're in a great space, guys. All right. So lots of things to talk about right now, of course. I want to start off with this is a big topic. I know we're all going to have opinions. The Joe Rogan stuff. Of course, Joe Rogan has a $100 million contract. Let me just make $100 million contract. $100 million contract.
It starts to add up to money at some point. Yeah.
It's 11 million people tune into his show. Joe Rogan is a comedian, but he also has a lot of people on that talk politics, people like Alex Jones, people like Jordan Peterson. Oh, but he did endorse Bernie Sanders. You know, that's what their whole thing is. He has been peddling for at least 2 years now a lot of questionable, if not complete false, opinions about the vaccine, about COVID, about whether masks work, about ivermectin. And now he's, you know, if you don't know about this already, like, it's ridiculous, but I'm going to have to set it up. Neil Young, and then Nash is also Neil Young, Nash,
poor David Crosby.
Poor David Crosby. He'll do it too.
He don't know his music. Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, Paul McCartney. There's so many different, I think the Rolling Stones said it too. Joni Mitchell, all these artists have come together and said, we're pulling our music off of Spotify because Spotify you know, you can go back to our show in March of last year. I got a lot of attacks from the left saying this is a guy who has no editorial oversight. And you look at any newsroom podcast, doesn't matter, of that stature, the publicly traded company was that when I was at SiriusXM, if I said something wrong, 2 seconds later, I'd get a phone call, which, you know, didn't happen. I just knew about that. It is, people are calling for some sort of editorial oversight. They're saying, until you deal with this, we're taking our music off. So let's play this clip. Sorry for the really long setup, just for folks who've been under, I don't know, don't pay attention. Let's play this.
Mercifully, who've been not paying attention.
This is, sorry, this is that, excuse me, I've got like a million different things on this. Let's show the Marianne Williamson tweet.
Most interesting one to me is Marianne Williamson, who you may remember ran for president. We've had her on TMZ Live. She's a very successful motivational speaker and author. She said, I'm triple vaxxed, but unless they're standing for hate or calling for violence, banning someone's podcast is too much like burning a book to me. Obviously getting into book burning. Joe Rogan should talk on his podcast about whatever he damn well pleases. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, here's the thing. And Charles Harvey, I've come to realize over the last day, this is not really about COVID. This is a full-fledged cancellation campaign with people out there who don't agree with Joe Rogan, who want to get him off of the air.
I loved the TMZ angle because this is hidden normies. This is Joe Rogan's, you know, audience. He's leaning in as this like, yo, guy, you don't have to do the work. I brought a doctor on. He's summarizing it for us. See, you don't actually have to read the studies. You've done the research because I am your vehicle of research. But here's the thing about books. There are editors. And I don't know of any books published in this day and age, or frankly, you know, years ago when publishers, 100 years ago, who did not have some form of he's also, this isn't creative license, in my opinion. He is not sitting here saying, this is just art, and here's my artistic interpretation of, you know, it's not a metaphor. He's actually spewing junk science at this point. All right, I know, Arun, you're contrarian in chief here.
Yeah, no, I'm a contrarian in chief. I think it's probably junk science. Like, I think the things that he has said that are incorrect are probably incorrect. I think there's some damage to that. But to me, this is sort of like, you know, when people on Fox News were attacking The Daily Show for like what they did. I'm not saying that Joe Rogan is comedy, but he is like alternative podcasting. And I have to say, the venom that's being thrown at him, even if it's in the right direction, it does occur to me that it's only pointed in that direction. And that, you know, people saying, you know, the things Joe Rogan says are going to kill people. The things Oprah Winfrey says have killed people. Tons and tons and tons of people.
But that's in the
She
past.
has spewed not one, but two monsters, you know, not just Dr. Phil, but Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz is a much better doctor than Dr. Phil. But, you know, but these are both, you know, and there is no accountability there. Right? There's no accountability for all of the misreporting, you know, things that are accepted by the mainstream media, and this is what fuels this kind of paranoia, are just no one ever admits they're wrong about it. And then when someone who isn't part of the club gets it wrong, they are punished. So yes, I think there should be accountability. Maybe we do have to start evaluating these things differently, like viewership should matter in terms of like who does have editorial, who doesn't have, like, doesn't matter if you're a comedy show, doesn't matter if you're, you know, an alternative kind of shock podcast. It doesn't matter what you are. If you have a certain viewership, you have to have a certain number of fact checkers for whatever that is. But but number one, I don't want to see corporations enforcing it because who knows where they're coming from. And I want to see it applied evenly. You know, the things that come out, I see things coming out in mainstream newspapers and, for instance, about like buildup in Ukraine and stuff that are like misleading and incorrect. I'm reminded about what they did in the Iraq war and how there's been no accountability for it. So like, these are big questions and we should wrestle with them in a big way. And like Joe Rogan's a big target because he is sort of, you know, he's able to say what he wants whenever demo places to a huge audience of people.
Yeah.
But this mess of people looking for information in all the wrong places is, I think, hard to put an individual blame on. People are looking to Joe Rogan for the wrong things. He should be the spice in their media diet and people are just sitting there eating it like they're eating bowls of salt or sugar, you know, and it's
citing
gonna
him.
rot your
I mean,
teeth.
my
I
own,
don't know where.
my own aunt cited him like 6 months ago, and I was like, "What?" And she's a Democrat. She's like a Hillary, you know, kind of Democrat, and she cited him about something, and I said, "He's like strong signs." I do want to just come back on one thing. Like, number one, if Oprah was doing that today in this environment, I bet you she would get some.
But he's
pushback.
running for Senate. Has she said, "I regret putting him on my show"? You should not
She
listen to the things that he has said. He is unreliable. I don't
Because
know.
she
Like,
is
I would
not
like
the
to see her
target
make
she's
that
advocating.
comment.
But is that about her at this point, or is it about the people who now carried his show, NBC? I mean, yes, she might have pushed him out there 10 years ago, but I don't wholly soul.
She's the personality. Her name's on the show. Joe Rogan's the personality. His name is on the show. If we're saying
she
he
doesn't
needs more
have
staff,
a show anymore,
so does
Arun.
she.
Like blaming
Well, she has a
the black
network.
woman who gave him a platform and not NBC, knowing very well that and
That's
there's
true too. Where are their people? But yeah, but I'm
and
just,
there's a
you know,
podcast,
yes.
by the way, that goes
No
through this.
heads will roll at NBC.
But
Right.
specifically, there's a podcast that is that goes through this stuff, misinformation in the media. I forgot the name of it. I'll put it in the chat later. That went through how fast Dr. Oz's show started to change course. And part of it was because the business model of being a daily show, and that in the medical community, there aren't that many breakthroughs that often. They take 10, 15 years. So we had to fill it up with other stuff and started to go off on a tangent. Now, alternatively, a comedian who does take this seriously is John Oliver. The first thing he did when he started a show at HBO was hire all these ProPublica editors and journalists to come and inform his show and have stats. You can do it in a much more strategic, thoughtful way. Obviously, the audience is different. And this is part of Rogan's spiel, is he wants to lean into, you know, whether it's the populace, the meatheads, or he's got all these different angles. Rabb, you've been silently. Go on. Your take.
So here's my issue. If there's a publicly traded corporation that is profiting off of a form of violence, and I consider this a form of violence, when you knowingly push things that put people's lives in danger, that's a form of violence. I believe language can be a form of violence, right? When you're profiting off of that at the expense of public health, you know, you can't listen. You can't curse on corporate airwaves because that's how society. That's bad. You can be fined for it. That's a big deal. To drop the F-bomb, you know, on MSNBC or CNN and so forth, right? But here you have a guy peddling something that has no proof, right? It's not just that we disagree. It's just there's nothing there, and it can kill people. Now, if the argument is, well, this is what Oprah did, she was complicit because she profited off of pushing up Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz, then yeah, then she's culpable too. But it's beyond an individual. It's about the infrastructure, and that infrastructure is supported with taxpayer dollars and and our government, because it is publicly traded, which means that it goes through the capital markets that are regulated by the SEC, and that means that they have to be accountable to us. And I think part of that accountability should be, are they promoting and profiting from things in significant harm's way? And I believe that what Joe and others are doing does that. And I honestly don't care who gets taken down as a result of this. I mean, this is not about race identity or political partisanship. This is about preserving public health. And to do this in a pandemic where we've lost over 1 million lives, right? When we see the disparities that have happened, is a level of evil and greed that we are complicit in, because we can actually hold folks like that accountable if the engine that produces it is a Spotify that is publicly traded. Now, if it's a private business, I have a different opinion. And with regard to burning books too, that's not a good point of reference, because if you have your own personal library and you want to burn books, have at it. That's your right. But if you are a school district burning books, that's very different. Like he's not being censored, because only governments can do that, right?
There
And
you
not
go.
what
That's
this is
the
about.
Wait, I want to
That I
go to
understand,
Rokana in a
and
second.
can I just jump in on something really quick though?
Real quick, because I think this relates to Rokana's.
Okay, actually,
comments.
yeah, he's from Silicon Valley, so why don't I?
I do want to just say one thing. Silicon Valley expert resident in chief. Rokana was on MSNBC talking about misinformation. And I think this leads into the government aspect here, right? Is censorship and what government can do and yada, yada. But
like the government's not going to take on the mainstream media. The government's only going to pick on smaller media, period. You know,
Spotify's not small. Let's be very clear. His audience is larger than Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN combined.
No, it's big, but it's different. It's not this huge infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, right? It has not achieved hegemony consensus, right? Like the three networks controlling a monopoly in our minds for the 20th century led to many problems.
I think that is the preconceived notion of people over a certain age. But the reason why Joe Rogan has gone completely untouched until now is because people don't realize in their bones how much he is dictating information. It's like undercurrent, but it's not. It's above board. He has an 11 million person audience, which is larger than Fox, that's Tucker Carlson, and every MSNBC show and every single CNN show combined. That is insane. And so it is actually out there. It's just people, it's like when Bernie was having like 50,000 people show up to a rally and they ignored him, but he was obviously when the numbers, he was a front runner, in my opinion, in some states.
And grassroots have influenced, but grassroots
Facebook is
organizing
right? Like Facebook is horrible, but like a world without Facebook is worse. So why? Because it is not like a place where people can actually do that work. There is no cultural space to do that work. So yeah, it's like, music services, whatever, this is all private or whatever. Like this is culturally the way that we communicate. This is where we're getting our music. This is where we're getting our things. And we have to start from the basis of that being real and that being accepted as being real.
But no one's talking about shutting down Spotify.
Right.
That's not the issue. And in fact,
no.
Facebook.
But the idea that like when you do these big systemic changes and you haven't thought about, like, it seems to me easier just to say, let it all hang out. All real information, misinformation, because any world in which you start to legislate hurts small people and helps.
We're not anarchists.
The big, helps the powerful. No, but it helps the powerful and it hurts the weak.
That's not entirely true. We have regulation for a reason. Let me clarify. This is not Joe Rogan being on an equal playing field with me. Joe
if that were the case, I'm trying to save, but I'm saying what the thing that you're doing to get rid of the guy you don't like, the surgery that you want to do on our socioeconomic, cultural, political body that gets rid of Joe Rogan kills a lot of other things that I think are probably good, like including investigative journalism, including alternative media sources. Like those things are.
We live in an algorithm society.
Those things are not happening in the mainstream media.
But
you're comparing Joe Rogan.
We don't. The algorithm.
No, I'm saying I will take 1,000 Joe Rogans to save the Michael Brookses.
Okay, Michael Brooks started his show before the algorithm shifted, and he still did not get an equal playing field. Majority Report has been on for over 10 years, and they hit 1 million last year. 1 million subscribers. That's, how many subscribers that is? It's more or less 100,000 a year. There were obviously bigger years, but that has only been able to happen because they organized methodically over years and years. Whereas a right-wing show, the new right-wing, they get boosted. The algorithm is suited towards them. This is not an equal playing field we're living in. What we're saying is bring it back to an equal playing field, because right now, Joe Rogan was literally handed a red carpet to spread his misinformation to get paid for, whereas I've hosted a show on SiriusXM as a headliner. The person who was doing the counter show to mine was Steve Bannon. Like, interesting, right? We are not given on the left or investigative reporters, and frankly, even the center left at this point, the same opportunities to spread information. This is not equal playing field. We are saying bring it equal by having regulation. And I don't think it affects
the cure is going to hurt you more than you think it will, honestly.
The cure is, there's no
unlike
cure
a vaccine, which everyone should get 100%, there is no blowback.
I remember the days 5 years ago when I would post something and it would actually get organic growth. Nowadays, the corporations have influenced us so much that it is not the same. It is not the same, even, and that's because they've gone completely unregulated. It's like capital regulated doesn't hurt the everyday person. I mean, I actually think this is kind of a libertarian perspective on media, because of course, when things go unregulated, it's going to benefit the wealthiest and their incentives. Let's play this real quick clip of Rokana. Yeah.
Let's talk about another big theme of the book, and that's misinformation that spreads like wildfire online, impacted the 2020 election, impacted January 6th, where people gathered, impacted the aftermath of the election, people still believing that somehow Donald Trump won the election. He didn't, of course. You kind of lay out a little bit of a roadmap at how to get at this problem, which for some reason has frustrated lawmakers. And, you know, you're talking to tech companies that aren't necessarily interested to put profits to the side. So how do you get at the problem of misinformation on social media?
Well, there has to be regulation and there has to be responsibility. On the regulation part, here's what we should agree on. Facebook knew before January 6th that there were threats of assassination on their sites with specific days, specific times, specific people named, and they sat on that information. They didn't share that. They didn't take that content down. How is that legal? We ought to make sure that they don't have the Section 230 protection to have content that incites violence. Then in terms of social media ethics, you don't sit here all morning and spew misinformation. Why? It's not because you're going to get sued. It's not because you're fearful of repercussions. It's because you have some sort of ethics, some sort of responsibility. There isn't that yet in Silicon Valley on social media. They have to care. As media companies, they need to accept that they're media companies and they need to have some journalistic standards.
So how do you impose that on them? You're plugged into Silicon Valley. You, as you say, many of the leaders of those companies support you and send you back to Washington. What do they say when you confront them with this?
Well, they give this absolute defense of the First Amendment, but here's what the First Amendment doesn't protect. And, you know, Joe and I have talked about this before. Instagram, the fact that you're selling a consumer product that is causing depression in teenagers, don't tell me that's about the First Amendment. The fact that you're allowing for misinformation on the climate or misinformation that is killing people because they're not taking a vaccine, that's not about the First Amendment. So, yes, you need to have a First Amendment, but you also have to be responsible in consumer protection and basic requirements of not spreading this disinformation. And Congress should regulate some of that.
And how companies are doing this? From their own internal documents that we've read. They know it and they continue to do it. Such an important conversation.
All right. What can government do, Rep Rabb, at the state level? Anything?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the larger issue is understanding, like, the congressman made some good points. And actually, I was on MSNBC with him about 10 years ago when I was promoting my book, Invisible Capital. Yeah.
Wait, what's your book? Because this is very much related. This is interesting.
Yeah. So my book is Invisible Capital, How Unseen Forces Shape Entrepreneurial Opportunity. So it looks at modern day U.S. business in the context of structural inequality. And I actually go after Donald Trump in a book I wrote in 2010 before he even kind of promoted birtherism. Using him as an example of
before it was popular and profitable.
We just add one more thing. You know who was a birther? Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, I don't know that, but absolutely, that seems accurate. Yeah,
that seems accurate. So, when you're talking about businesses that are leveraging publicly financed infrastructure to increase their profits, right? To maximize shareholder value, right? Then that need to be held accountable. And we already do that. And even those folks who, what's the guy's name? He was on MSNBC, older, crotchety white guy with bushy hair.
Oh, who went to RT? You mean, what's his name?
I think that may be the same guy. He talked about the Rutgers women's basketball team and said some very disparaging things about black women.
Oh, no. You mean Don? You mean from Connecticut?
Don
you mean
Don Imus?
Don Imus. Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Oh man,
he got shut down. He got shut down. My friend Roberto Lovato with Presente, they did a whole thing around Lou Dobbs. And got him, right? He was part of that whole thing. CNN, from CNN.
Border wall.
The border wall, and also use of the I word. Right. So they're examples of grassroots organizing to positively influence corporate media. That's less from a government perspective and more from, we don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to have a bad reputation, but it's not an either or situation. Governments have their roles. And look, I don't mind, I'm used to being Black in a racist society. So I have accepted that is the norm, but there is a threshold. There is a threshold. If you're inciting violence, you're inciting violence, right? And if you are promoting things that actually can get people killed, be put in harm's way, there needs to be a standard, because we have a standard for profanity, which never made any sense. And everyone respects that. Why? Because they get seriously fined. So I think we need to figure out what that is. This is not Joe Rogan specific. There are plenty of celebrities who have nutty positions, who may be on the right side of the issue on a couple of things. But if you're promoting things that folks are actually going to do that could put them in harm's way, I think that is precisely the role of government. That is precisely the role.
Arun?
We say this about everything else except for this, and I'm just trying to hold true for it. If something is not universal, it will not be applied correctly, and the people who will be hurt are the least amongst us every single time. Rachel Maddow is never going to be responsible for these zillions of lies she told over the last couple of years, whether it's about Russia, P-tapes, who knows what. Things have been
the difference of free speech.
Now we're having definition of what isn't. I think it's easy to say this virus is hurting someone, this information is hurting someone, but lack of knowledge about a budget has a much bigger body count.
Yeah, but that's in a court of law.
The idea of that's political violence. The fact that we can only imagine. No, that's fine. Look, the law is not a thing I try to concern myself with. As Charles Dickens said, it is a much better thing to suffer injustice than to think about the law. Okay, but you see what I'm saying? We can only conceive of violence as individualistic attacks on people who feel unsafe in their neighborhood or whatever. We don't think of a budget as being violent,
of course.
And so I just worry that we are empowering people who have lied to us to make money for different reasons. And it's easy to be, to go after people who it seems ignorant, right? It's this is very ignorant. It's easy to attack. Something that's racist is obviously extremely ignorant. And so it's easy to attack. And these more sophisticated lies that I say have just as big body counts. We end up going wars places. Millions of Iraqis are dead. These are big, big things. And none of the cures that I've heard for misinformation are even going to slightly be addressed at access journalism, at the kind of cozy relationship of big mainstreams with things. And I don't know, maybe it's right, but to me, it's nibbling around the edges of the big problem, which is that the news is not meant to inform us. It's meant to do what everything else is meant to do.
Okay,
it's meant to sell advertising.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because
Right.
I want to close out with one clip from Brian Stelter, who for CNN has a show called Reliable Sources. Brian Stelter was the media reporter at New York Times, and he, positioned that into
It's been his beat forever,
It has.
Covering watching the detectives has been his thing.
He's also bald. Just to go back there.
Bald American, folks. A bald American. God
I think that's so
him.
Crazy. He's younger than me. And it's when I learned that, I was I thought Brian Stelter is just for most of it, he just moved into midlife, around 25.
He's younger than you?
Uh-huh. Let's play this clip. Now everyone's younger than me. I'm at that stage now. I'm I'm 20 years older than someone who
You haven't caught up to me yet, somehow.
I don't know. It's because I dyed my hair. Let's play this clip.
All right. Roll Stetler.
Stelter, go. Another bald guy.
Which sounds great, but not all opinions are created equal. You think about major newsrooms like CNN that have health departments and desks and operations that work hard on verifying information on COVID-19. And then you have talk show stars like Joe Rogan who just wing it, who make it up as they go along. And because figures like Rogan are trusted by people that don't trust real newsrooms, we have a problem that's much bigger than Spotify, much bigger than any single platform, Kate. But that's what is the heart of this right now.
Yeah, but you're right. It is getting at something bigger that isn't going to be solved in one Joe Rogan video or one statement from Spotify.
So I think
This reminds me so much of that moment in Ferguson that I will never forget. And we probably talked about it on this show before, where Jake Tapper asked someone participating in protests, do you think it's appropriate, the amount of coverage that, this is receiving, et cetera? And he was like, I don't know, bitch, you the news. It's like, you are the news. Like, why do you think it's like people miraculously are tuning out from the news and tuning into Joe Rogan? It's like, ask yourself why. Don't just report that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is exactly
Right.
it. I think whether it's
I'm
the
getting
neoliberal
upset.
establishment, no, but this is it. It's whether it's the neoliberal establishment of the Democratic Party. Forget about the Republicans, but the Democratic Party completely being blind to the fact that people of color want representation, that young people are the most diverse generation in history, that economic inequality is more than it's ever been. The fact that Joe Biden laughed at young people and said, oh, you think you've got it hard, when literally like every single young person in this country is choosing between paying off a student loan and housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's that side. And you wonder why when in the vacuum that's created when Bernie's left, people are starting to warm up to Joe Rogan and go into a pipeline of whatever extremism. So it's between the media echoing that and not putting on voices that look and sound and understand what real people are facing. This is what is created. I couldn't agree more, Arun. It's why, but that's why we are here. I used to go on MSNBC and CNN, all these things, and like they don't call me anymore. So I got a podcast here. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon is running a Nazi revolution.
And we also have to acknowledge too the fishbowl. And you alluded to it somewhat, Arun, but we have media consolidation that didn't just happen. It happened with the complicity of politicians on both sides of the aisle, most notably Bill Clinton. We allowed for that media consolidation because those are the same folks who are cutting big checks to the Democratic Party and to the Republican Party. It is that corporate duopoly that is at the core of this corrosion. And as a result, people think they have choice and they don't realize that all of these different things that they consume are owned by the same handful of multi-billion-dollar corporations. And we don't have the requisite media literacy to understand why that is so dangerous. So your point, Arun, about how going after a Joe Rogan or a Spotify is chipping at the margins, it is. There needs to be an inside and outside game. It's a both and situation. We always have to talk about media justice. And it's not just having diverse voices, it's also having equity, actually having a piece of the pie, so that it's not, we get to be on these corporate platforms, but we actually build the corporations ourselves, whether they're worker owned, whether they're in conventional spheres or not. That's where the real power is. But unless and until people understand that media landscape, we are indeed just chipping at the margins.
And I'm curious if there's going to be some sort of unionization effort. There's unionizing happening in newsrooms all over the country right now. But
this will help, actually. I think putting some power in workers' hands at media things will be an incredible resource. People get
including editorialism, because it's
they should be like, we all know better than that, all of us. But it has to be a sea of people saying, like, we know this. We know this. Yeah.
If you work at Spotify and you're listening, listen. CWA does really good union organizing. You might want to call them up. There's many more, but they do some great.
CWA is a fantastic union, absolutely fantastic union.
Yeah. So all right, so we've come to a solution. It always comes back to the workers. That's it, right?
Organizing workers actually does a lot for what ails you.
Guys, we solved it. Good job.
Woo, that was easy. What's next?
I got a little hot there for a second. I was like, I thought it was my booster, but nope.
Let's do inflation next episode, okay? We'll do it.
Oh, let's do inflation.
Let's do inflation. It seems like it's really dragging people down. It's getting people down. Let's do it.
Oh my gosh. I'm so happy to have you guys here for Solidarity Wednesday. And Rabb, thanks for sticking around, for joining early, I should say.
We know you're busy. You could hear your phone blowing up. I was like, oh God, I hope no one's trying to ram something through the legislation.
Well, he's not there.
Yeah,
I'm trying to find
out
what
vote to stop something insane from happening.
Arun, I don't even know what district I'm going to be representing because we're waiting for Friday to see what the new district lines are. I could be carved out of my district.
Well, then you have to run for.
You're the kind of district they will be trying to carve. So definitely let us know. I think it'd be really interesting to tell people how that's shaken out.
Draft Rabb for anything at this point. Arun, what are you working on in Italy right now, and what's happening with the committee?
Yeah.
Well, we just had a presidential election here in Italy in which they always say the person who doesn't want it is who gets it in this thing. And this time it turned out to be exactly that to a T, because the shoe-in person who's the prime minister, Mario Draghi, who's a technocratic consensus prime minister of Italy right now, made the mistake of saying, if you nominate me, I'll accept it the day before the vote. You can't do that. So rather, the only person who said he didn't want it was Martorella, who was the president. He said, I don't want it. I've actually ordered movers. There were trucks in front of the palace. He was like, I don't want it. I don't want it. And so they made him president again. They were like, no, guy, turn around and get back in there. So this does stave off political chaos, quote unquote, for at least a couple of years. There will not be an election. But interestingly, and the reason I went on in this whole thing is just because I spend so much time talking about the Italian far right here, which is talking about Bannon, Salvini, Giorgia Meloni. The knives are finally out there. They have so much discipline, right? The right always has so much discipline. They never fight each other. They are actively fighting each other right now.
They're fighting each other.
They're doing coke. When this guy does cocaine, she's an idiot. It's
I love Italian politics.
It's all messy. Yeah.
Bunga, bunga, bunga.
They tend to get back together right before it's important. It's probably why they're fighting now, but they haven't done this in a long time. So people have decided Salvini's weak enough to try to take him down. Nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal. So here at Committee, we are keeping a very, very close eye on Italy.
Fascinating. As Italy goes, so go all the fascists.
The bellwether, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Keep us informed. Don't worry. Joe Biden will save us. All right. Thanks, guys. You're the best.
Did you really just say that?
I always say that when I feel really at a loss of hope. I just look to my elder Joe Biden and say, all that wisdom from all those years on the Foreign Services Committee and, understanding. God. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Bye, y'all. Rep Rabb and Arun Chaudhary. Go check out Arun's show, the committee program on Mondays here at on our channel on YouTube. And of course, he's got his podcast as well, if you'd like to listen into podcast form for the committee program. All right, everybody. We will see you on Fem Friday. We have an amazing Fem Friday. You're definitely going to check it out. And if you missed Rockfin yesterday, you can go back and watch TNS Live. TNS Live every Tuesday, live, 8 p.m. We do an extensive interview with somebody, and we talk to Jim Zogby, Dr. Zogby, about what's going on in Israel right now. Some crazy stories about the Amnesty International declared Israel an apartheid state, and there was a horrible murder of an 80-year-old man who's an American citizen, but was going back to his home in Palestine, and he was basically bound and tortured by Israeli forces, and we talk a little bit more about that. It's just a super sad story. But you can check that out on rockfin.com/Nomiki for the extended interview. And we will see you on Friday. Stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for clash solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.